I grew up in the tail end of the Web 1.0 where sensibilities online were quite different than they are today. There was a much higher bar to entry to accessing the web, and you needed to be computer literate. And the home computer only really started to become affordable in the early 90s. The internet ran on dial-up, and it was slow as shit. So back in the day, the only people really using the internet at the amount we use it today would be the nerds. Companies with real advertising dollars like Coca-Cola and Nike weren't really investing into internet advertisement, partly because the pool of people to advertise to was much smaller, and the liability. You see, the Web 1.0 was much more brutal. It was the Wild West, where you didn't have giant corporations and governments moderating content and dictating what is and isn't hate speech. On a psychological level, this brought out something we had yet to see before at that scale, and the Web 1.0 was truly a playground for people's darkest desires. This was back when you still had a shield of anonymity blocking the real world from the digital. You could say anything, do anything, and no one would think less of you because nobody knew who you were. And that still exists today on sites like 2chan and 4chan and 8kun. But the days of digital privacy are far behind us, and it's only going to get more difficult as we move forward for sites like 8kun to exist, as they tend to get pushed to the edges of the internet. I've been feeling nostalgic lately about the Web 1.0, and my path has been crossing with 4chans quite a bit, and I've started to, map out all these points that I don't think many people know are the connective tissue between all these very pivotal sites that have shaped internet culture as we know it today. So, for today's video, I will be going through the family tree of 4chan. The 4chan family tree. God damn it, why didn't I should have said that the first time? SomethingAwful.com, or SA for short, was a website started by Richard Charles Kiyanka. That's a fun name to say. He also went by the screen name Lowtax, and the website had gone live on November the 16th, 1999. It was a hybrid between a forum and a blog site, and it played an integral role in shaping internet culture. The forum would garner tight-knit communities with inside jokes, early versions of memes, if you will. Like many of these early free speech sites, they garnered an audience of shitposters, trolls, and edgelords. There was reviews of horror porn, which is, it's like hentai if it was real. Watch SWAT.avi. It was a very popular meme on the forums. Spoilers, it was produced by the same Brazilian production company that made Two Girls, One Cup, and it was a video of 4 girls shitting on each other, smearing it all over their bodies, and throwing up on each other. So, I'll just save you yeah. There was also regular hentai reviews. Photoshop Fridays was a huge community feature, and the creepypasta Slender Man had also originated on SA. In 2020, during the Me Too movement, Lowtax sold the site to longtime mod Jeffrey Yost Post after backlash stemming from domestic abuse allegations. Lowtax would be banned from the site following the sale and take his own life on November 9th, 2021. I guess he did something awful, am I right? Okay, alright, okay. Hentai would be banned from the site in 2004, prompting longtime user Moot to create his own website, 4chan. But before we do that, why don't we rewind a bit back to 1999. If SomethingAwful.com was the father to modern message boards, then our next board we're going to cover would be the mother, 2channel. Hiroyuki Nishimura was a Japanese native going to college abroad at the University of Central Arkansas. You could say 2channel had its own parent websites that it was heavily inspired by, ISU World and Amezo. The text board 2channel would go online May 30th, 1999 and would be a huge success instantly in Japan for 2 reasons. One of those reasons would be lack of competition. You see, even though those 2 boards were considered the parents of 2channel, ISG World closed in 1998, and the majority of its user base headed over to Amezo. Amezo would close down in June, the month after the launch of 2channel. As Amezo grew in popularity, it became more difficult for the creators of the board to keep up with the financial costs of the servers, which at the time leaves 2channel the text board monopoly in Japan. Reason number 2 for its success was Hiroyuki managed to skirt around Japanese law and cultivated this website of free speech. As wacky and wild as Japan is, its laws are actually much more conservative than they are in the West. To get around these more strict Japanese laws, Hiroyuki geniusly decided to host his website in America. Therefore, it only had to abide by American laws, even though Japanese users were able to access the website in Japan. And in this sense, Hiroyuki was truly a pioneer and before his time. 2channel, for your information, is a reference to old CRT TVs in Japan. You had to set the dial to channel 2 to be able to play the Famicom, aka the Nintendo. By 2002, 2channel became the most searched website in Japan, according to Google. And by 2004, it became the largest internet forum in the country. But just like his predecessor Amezo, server costs became way too expensive for Hiroyuki to handle, even though the site was bringing in over $1 million a day. Hiroyuki would strike up an online friendship with Ron Watkins. Ron Watkins would introduce him to his father, an American entrepreneur, Jim Watkins, who also happened to own his own website hosting platform. At the time, Jim Watkins was known as the king of porn. He had taken a sticky page out of Hiroyuki's book and was hosting a pretty popular porn site in Japan. Just like 2channel, Asian Bikini Bar, which was hosted in America, didn't have to abide by the Japanese genitalia censorships in porn. Side note, he also hosted a website called Pokeman, which was a gay website that also was a parody of the Pokemon branding, which Nintendo purchased off him for a hefty sum because the site was hosted in Singapore, making it difficult to sue over copyright infringement. But in 2014, after a decades-long friendship and business partnership, Hiroyuki and Jim Watkins would split ways after Jim would accuse Hiroyuki of missing payments for the site. He would end up seizing 2channel from Hiroyuki, which I'm not sure if he actually did legally. It's kind of hard to tell. The situation was very muddy. Like, I think he pretty much just erased his name from the paperwork. I might be getting the info wrong here. I'm just going off memory, but I'm pretty sure Jim did have like did own a portion of the website, and he pretty much just like scratched Hiroyuki's name off the paperwork, and then because the website was being hosted on his server, he just restricted any admin access and just literally just stole it from him. Hiroyuki would end up just cloning the website and moving it to a new domain, 2chan.sc, which he still runs today. But why don't we jump back across the pond from Japan to the US to rejoin in 2003 our hentai obsessed buddy Moot. Moot would launch 4chan on October the 1st, 2003 in response to somethingawful.com banning hentai. It was created as like an unofficial English counterpart to 2channel, which carried a lot of the same topics and features. 4chan is an image board that gets a lot of fair and unfair criticism. There's definitely like bad apples on the website that do like hate brigading and really shitty things to people. Again, we're talking about websites that are, you know, really dedicated to like edgelords, but they've also done a lot of really awesome things as well. I've never really been a user of the site, but as I mentioned in the intro, I've become a really big fan of 4chan lately because I just seem to like be reading all these stories and crossing paths with 4chan, and they do a lot of really hilarious things, such as creating many of our popular memes like lolcats, rickrolls, rage comics, Wojaks, Pepe the Frog, tricking the world into thinking Pepe the Frog is a racist symbol, tricking the media into thinking that the OK hand sign is also a racist symbol, the He Will Not Divide Us saga, video coming on that sometime in the near future. They ironically created the alt-right, the left-wing hacker group Anonymous was started on 4chan, they brought us the Fappening, they broke the news on Jeffrey Epstein's death before NBC was able to, and they also played a pretty big role in Gamergate. In 2014, Gamergate would be a divisive topic amongst the users of 4chan. In general, Gamergate was actually just a very complicated subject. If you want to learn more about that, I actually have 2 videos that I did on it. Both are about an hour long. Part 1 covers kind of like the lead up and like everything that brought brought Gamergate to like what it ended up becoming, and then the second video actually just kind of runs through what happened with Gamergate exactly. But for a TLDR, basically what happened was there were allegations with evidence thrown at games journalists, or more specifically Zoe Quinn, that there had been signs of payola and corruption within the industry. For instance, Zoe Quinn released an objectively shitty game that ended up getting pretty decent reviews and coverage from various respected game sites like Kotaku or Rock Paper Shotgun, because she had relationships with people throughout the industry. Here's a clip just to illustrate how complicated it got. So to recap, Maya is having sex with Zoe. Maya works for Zoe and other devs. Maya also works for Silverstring. Maya, through Silverstring, has influence at major publications. Maya is also having sex with Brandon, who is the chairman of the IGF. Most of, if not all of the winners / finalists were either friends with or worked with Maya and Brandon. Silverstring CEO Lucas Johnson and their CCO Andrew Wilson both wrote on multiple games that were finalists at the IGF that year. Games journalists and the gaming industry and mainstream media even would team up and retaliate against these claims being thrown at the industry and at Zoe. Where they messed up was not only did they go after 4chan, but gamers in general, just labeling everyone as sexist. But like 4chan users tend to do with too much time on their hands, they started to look more deeply into these accusations of harassment being thrown at Zoe and other key pivotal figures in the anti-Gamergate movement. And a lot of them would come up falsified or like really sus, and it just, like I said, it ends up getting really complicated and just kind of muddies the whole thing. So then you start questioning, well, okay, well, was 4chan really responsible for any of these hate brigades, or were they actually just fabricated? Either way, 4chan ended up crumbling under the heat brought on by the mainstream media and banned anything Gamergate related on their website. A lot of longtime 4chan users did not appreciate the stance the website made on Gamergate. The internet at that time was becoming more and more corporatized, so free speech websites were harder and harder to find, and this went against everything 4chan had initially stood for. And because of this, in 2015, a lot of users would jump from 4chan over to 8chan, where free speech was an absolute. And on September the 21st, 2015, after all the backlash and controversy surrounding his stance on Gamergate, the founder of 4chan, Moot, would end up selling the website to Hiroyuki, the founder of 2chan, the owner and manager of both boards to this day. Before we move on to the final piece of the puzzle, 4chan has so many children on the internet today. I just want to kind of just quickly run through some of the smaller ones. So we could start off with 420chan, which I think is self-explanatory. E-chan, Waka-chan, 4chan, 7chan, Anon IB, What the Fucks, Ko-chan, Guro-chan, 1chan, 2Ko-chan, FFML-chan, Star-Chan, Ray-chan, Anime TC, 573chan, Banana, Nozomi Online, SOS Dan, Chan-chan, Osa, Hentai SH, 6chan, Forgotten Tower, 12chan, S-chan, P-chan, Desu-chan, Wee-chan, Neek-chan, Nul-chan, Mecha-chan, and Wizard-chan, a website for incels and virgins. One of those incel and virgins was Frederick Brennan, aka Hot Wheels. Hot Wheels was bound to his wheelchair by a life-threatening disease and bound to a miserable life of ridicule.
When I first found 4chan, I just saw what a lot of people were saying, and I felt like I finally had discovered what people were really thinking. Saying things like, you know, gas all the crippled people, you know, I hate Downies, throw them off a bridge. I felt like I was seeing a window into people's hidden thoughts that they weren't saying because it wasn't socially acceptable. But this is what everybody's really thinking when they look at me, you know. Wow, look at this crippled retard.
Until he moved to the Philippines, started doing coke and banging hookers. Since he was no longer a virgin, he decided to move away from Wizard-chan and started his own message board, 8chan. 8chan was founded on October the 22nd, 2013. Frederick's vision was kind of a child between 4chan and Reddit. He wanted to take the complete anonymity of 4chan, but 4chan was a site that was really locked down by the admins, like a new how would you call it? If you're unfamiliar with 4chan, like a new subreddit or the equivalent to hasn't been created on 4chan since I think 2008. Only admins are able to create new boards. Anyone can post, but only admins can create new boards. So you want to take the ability for anybody to create their own board or anyone to post from Reddit and mix that with the anonymity of 4chan. And Frederick would uphold his doctrine of keeping the website as free as possible, barring any calls to violence or anything involving children, obviously. I think you know what I'm talking about here. Which was a big factor in people jumping over from 4chan to 8chan in 2015 after the whole Gamergate controversy. In 2016, much like 2channel, server costs became increasingly too high for Frederick Brennan to be able to keep up with. And just like Hiroyuki, Frederick was introduced to Jim by Ron, the man who stole 2channel from Hiroyuki. Frederick would sell 8chan to Jim, and Jim would hire Frederick as an employee to manage the day-to-day of 8chan. Now, Jim and Ron are super interesting characters, and they play a major role in the fantastic HBO docuseries Q Into the Storm.
The girl sitting diagonally from me was masturbating while watching Game of Thrones, so that was nice. I was watching her masturbate. I didn't masturbate.
You see, QAnon, or more specifically Q, had started off with his home on 4chan, but quickly moved over to 8chan. QAnon-related posts would pretty instantly become 70% of the traffic on the site. Listen, I'd highly recommend checking out that docuseries, but spoilers, so skip ahead 20 seconds if you don't want me to spoil the ending for you. But it's pretty much confirmed that Ron Watkins is Q. Ron Watkins started QAnon, or at least he was like the second Q. But QAnon could be a whole separate video. I'm not covering that here. In 2019, there were 3 mass shootings that took place across the globe that were blamed on 8chan. The Christchurch shooting in New Zealand in March, Poway, California in April, and in El Paso, Texas in August. There is undoubtedly a ton of racism and xenophobia and just depravity on 8chan. That is impossible to deny. But if you look into the claims the mass media was making into 8chan being the source of all these tragedies, 8chan played a role, but it was like an unfair characterization of the site. Mainstream media decided to go ahead with the narrative anyways. 8chan essentially was kicked off the ClearNet, which, if you're unaware, is basically the internet you use day to day. At this point in their relationship, Jim and Frederick were kind of already on the outs after a major blow-up argument, which led to them not speaking for a while. And after the 3 shootings, even though Frederick was aware that 100% of the blame could not be put on 8chan, he did begin to see that, like, even the fact that a small part of something he created managed to propagate so much hate in people that escaped into the real world, he started to become disgusted with his creation. Frederick would go on a press tour that year, causing a lot of bad press for Jim and Ron, and a lot of legal troubles as well.
Expected them to see, now that 50 people have died, we need to do something. You know, one of the reasons is that they know, these shooters, that 8chan is a site with a community that is sympathetic to the ideas of the shooters. Like, you can dabble in Nazism, and you can see if it suits you, you can see if it, you know, if it's your kind of gig.
And as this war was brewing between Frederick and Jim, they decided to come to a compromise and just let things go. Jim would rebrand the website to 8kun so it no longer had any ties to Frederick.
8chan would become 8kun.
Also at this time, it managed to get back onto the ClearNet. But then Frederick would allow his hatred for Jim get the best of him and continue his attack, even going after Jim's iCard hearing. iCards are green cards, basically, and they were all living in the Philippines at the time Jim was trying to officially become a Filipino citizen. In retaliation, Jim filed a criminal case against Frederick. Even though Frederick is a free speech activist, the Philippines is not. Jim was using the Philippines' pretty strict hate speech laws against Frederick, which carried a 6-year minimum. 6 years in prison for Frederick would undoubtedly be a death sentence. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Filipino prisons, but they make butt rape look like blood pudding. I have no idea what that means. Frederick's lawyer managed to intercept the arrest warrant, allowing Frederick to flee the country before he was arrested. The US government implicated 8kun as a key factor into the January 6th breach on the Capitol, which is fair, it definitely did play a role, but Ron Watkins managed to somehow piggyback off the whole situation and become like an influential figure towards the end of Donald Trump's presidency. He would end up becoming a trusted advisor on the cybersecurity aspects of the scandals surrounding the 2019 presidential elections. 8kun would be down for an extended period of time, bouncing from server to server, essentially being kicked off the ClearNet. But even though they were nearly blackballed from the internet completely, they managed to find a home on a Russian server. To this day, it is still accessible via 8kun.top. Frederick would end up living with his family in the US. Jim Watkins seemed to be kind of on hard times at the moment. Even though Ron Watkins may have been the most influential Twitter account on the platform in 2020, he has since been permabanned. He currently has a following of almost 300,000 on Telegram. And that is a family tree of the Web 1.0. Let me know if you liked, I don't know, subscribe. Fucking who gives a shit.